Is my dog TPing me or is my dog experiencing anxiety?
This process is about training fear unlearning. And boy, if anyone out there has ever experienced a phobia, it is not as though you could say, I'm going to get over my fear of flying today or by the time I leave for my trip next week.
Hey, Drew here. Before we get started, I want to tell you about our sponsors for today's show. First, Colorado Citizens for Canine Welfare. Imagine a world where every dog knows the warmth of a loving home. A world where dogs are not trapped in small wired crates and dealing with extreme weather conditions and neglected by humans on a daily basis to turn a profit. Picture a place where mother and father dogs live free without the cycle of constant breeding and where puppies aren't commodities for profit. This is the world without cruel puppy mills. Let me introduce you to Colorado Citizens for Canine Welfare. 3CW is on a mission. A 501c3 nonprofit organization working tirelessly every day to turn this dream into reality. Join the fight against inhumane treatment of thousands of dogs trapped in commercial breeding facilities. 3CW aims to educate, enlighten, and to make a difference, to be the voice for the voiceless. You too can be a part of this necessary change. 3CW is dedicated to all dogs. They help guide puppy buyers to adopters towards responsible choices, adopting from licensed shelters, rescues, and ethical breeders. As dog lovers, we have to advocate for local and national animal welfare laws and be the change. Join us in creating a future where every dog has a chance to a warm and loving home. To learn how to find licensed, inspected shelters and rescues, visit the Find Dogs page at caninewelfare.org to learn how you can make a difference. Colorado Citizens for Canine Welfare, where compassion meets action. Also, Wonder Walker. A walk with your dog should be, well, a walk in the park, not a tug-of-war. The harness you choose should be safe for both you and your dog. As you know, I train dogs professionally, and the truth is that sometimes even trainers need a little help. For me, that means I prefer it when the dogs I'm training wear the best equipment. When it comes to harnesses, I ask my clients to get the Wonder Walker body harness for their dog because it will help me, them, and the dog meet our training goals as quickly and as safely as possible. I discovered Wonder Walker in 2009 and I've been using them ever since. The harnesses were developed in 2003 and they're still handmade by the same family-owned business in Seattle. They're the original no-pull harness. Here's why I'm such a huge fan. First, because the harness has 2 leash connections with 5 points of adjustment, so it's simple to fit for any size and breed. Second, since they fit properly, they help prevent injury and pain, which are common occurrences when using these mediocre harnesses. The bottom line, Wonder Walker has been my go-to harness for over 15 years. Visit wonderwalkerbodyhalter.com and use promo code LOVEDOG at checkout for 10% off discount. Love Dog is one word. That's wonderwalkerbodyhalter.com. Promo code LOVEDOG. Now, let's get on with the show.
Hey, Drew.
Hey. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Another show, another great topic. This one's on separation anxiety. I love it.
Yeah, this is crucially important, and I know so many people struggle with their pets having separation anxiety or less severe but equally important separation-related problem behaviors, everything from destruction to anxiousness, pacing, whining, and some people are totally unaware their dogs are suffering from this, so we are going to shine a big light on that today.
Yeah, Malena DeMartini is our guest name today. She's from out in Northern California, and she is the guru for this topic. And I'll just say that this topic comes up a lot.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people that have been through it with their dogs, and most have gotten through it, but it's very upsetting while it's happening. Upsetting not only to them, but oftentimes to people that live around them, sometimes in an apartment, sometimes in a single family home, whatever. The good thing is there's hope. She talks about prevention. I actually like the way she talks about prevention, and I'll let that just happen, and our listeners can find out. There's a lot that can be done in this field, but we're just very lucky to have her. She's the one, and I think it's going to be very helpful.
Yeah, she's incredible. Her work experience goes back 20 plus years just in this specific area. So she is singularly focused on this, and it's evidence-based. She dives deep into the research for her book and her website, which we'll put in our show notes for our audience. But it's going to give people ideas how to increase safety, improve their dog's well-being instantly after listening to this episode. And as you said, she's going to give you a big old dose of hope. So I think this is crucial, and everybody's got to dive deep into this, even if their dogs don't have it, as a way of preventing them from developing it.
Yeah, a big old dose of hope. I like the way that sounds. And also a big old dose of what to expect. So managing expectations in this case, very important.
Yeah.
People often want it resolved in a day.
Yeah. It's not a quick
It's not going to happen, but it's not going to take a year either. So I say let's just get right over to the show and let's hear what she has to say. It's good stuff.
All right, let's go chat with Malena.
The way I like to start out these shows is let's just explain what we're talking about and clear it up and demystify it for our listeners, and then take the deep dive. So I think the best way to do that, if you're okay with that, is just to ask you to explain what is separation anxiety. It's got the word anxiety in it. So what is it, and do we know what's going on in the dog's brain when it's occurring?
I actually really love this question, and thank you both for having me here. And the reason I love this question is that you pointed out it's got anxiety in the name. And if I had my druthers, I would rename this issue entirely, and I would call it home alone phobia, or something that did not contain specifically that word anxiety, for a number of reasons. And we can go down that rabbit hole. But one of them being is that when we start talking about anxiety, it leads us to the question of what exactly is going on in that dog's brain. And we, in this particular behavior, don't have a lot of information with respect to sort of the neuroscience side of things, because we won't put the dog in this incredibly stressful situation to sort of see what kind of brain matter is happening. What we do know, however, is that these dogs are displaying extreme levels of fear-like behavior. And we are able to observe that behavior, and that it's only occurring when the dog is separated and alone in their home.
It's such an important point, because I think so many of us behavior consultants get called in, as we've said many times, to stop the quote problem behavior. So, you're getting these calls that the dog's eating the baseboards, or if they're making noise in an apartment building, and everybody's looking for that quick fix, where the only benefit to having that anxiety in there might be that people are thinking about the internal state of the dog rather than the external behavior that they're seeing. So the one potential advantage is people are saying, okay, well, I need to really focus on that internal state of the dog. Do we know? I mean, we know what happens to animals that live with chronic distress, and that's basically what it is every time you leave your home, they go into this state. But do we know why it's developing? I mean, I'm sure you've looked at all the different studies, and the jury's still out whether this is genetic predisposition, is this, because they lost their home, etc. But what do you know as far as where separation anxiety or separation related problem behaviors start to form in dogs?
Yeah. Well, before I answer the second half of that question, I want to make a comment to what you said right before it, where you said that people are reaching out, typically stop this, frustrating and annoying behavior. And you're absolutely right. It's one of the first steps that I take as a practitioner, and that many of the graduates of my program take, is to help the guardian understand that this is an involuntary behavior. Yeah. The dog is not doing this, out of spite or all the things that many people think of. The dog is doing so because essentially they're terrified. And that is a very irrational thing for us to understand, right? By nature, phobias are irrational to those that are not experiencing them, but very real to the individual that is, which in this case would be the dog, right? So we don't always understand it. And once we can get them to understand and have the empathy for the dog who is really suffering, that changes the way with which we can they can and we can together approach the treatment protocol. But with respect to the genetic stuff and where it comes from, always have to laugh when I talk about this, because we know so much about what does not cause separation anxiety or separation related distress. We know very little about what does. And I not only would say that from reviewing so much literature, there's tons of literature on this issue. It's the number one most researched behavior issue for the past 4 decades, above aggression. Wow. Yeah, it is. But in all of that vast literature, there's very little on the genetic piece. There is some, and it just has been coming about in the last sort of maybe 10 years at most. And there's actually a haplotype, or for lack of, ease of term, sort of a genetic marker that they have found that is correlated with potentially having separation anxiety. So we basically are of the understanding that it is a combination of some genetics and some environment. But boy, I can tell you all about what doesn't cause it, but very little about what does.
Is it more common in some breeds versus others?
So this is a funny question, and I'm going to answer it with a story. And I'll tell you, the story is going to be embarrassing for me, but I think it gets its point across. When I first started exclusively working with separation anxiety, so that was 20 years plus ago, I was doing just separation anxiety after separation anxiety case. And I was asked to present at just a local San Francisco event. And someone in the audience said, "Can you tell me which breeds or what breed is the most prevalent for having separation-related behavior problems?" And I said, "You betcha," with all my arrogance, and said, it is uncanny the percentage of my client load that are pit bulls. And everyone was like, "Really? Huh?" Well, here's my big error. And I should never have made such an error. I came from a statistician background. I know better. My entire clientele was based in the San Francisco Bay Area. And guess what the number one breed, both purebred and adopted, is in the San Francisco Bay Area? Wow, it's the pit bull. So of course I'm going to have a higher propensity to have them as my clients. Some of the research about breeds is interesting as well. There's a Hungarian study, if I'm remembering it correctly, that shows this high prevalence of separation anxiety in Vizslas. And I was like, that may be because...
In the most popular Hungarian breed?
Right? So it made me laugh because it brought me back to that statement that I had made about this prevalence of pit bulls. Right now, I think there is not any sort of correlating evidence to show that we're seeing higher propensities in one breed or another. And what's fascinating to me is that all of the breeds that people say, well, those are so stable, they would never have this sort of behavior problem. We still see those breeds. And so, my guess is that the genetic research is going to get better and that we're going to start to find some of those correlations, but we're not there yet.
So it's not breed specific. I could tell you a story about a pit bull that I brought home once from a shelter, but I won't. It would make you feel a lot better. But I think pit bulls have, get a really bad rap, and I don't want to participate in that at all. So if it's not breed specific, could it potentially be more life stage specific? Puppyhood, adolescence, adult, senior. When is the dog or is a dog most likely to develop this condition?
I often tell people that, separation anxiety is rather indiscriminate. I don't see more in any age group, prevalence-wise. It can develop at any point in time. You can have a dog that has been perfectly content with staying home alone, and there's potentially some environmental precipitating event that flips that switch, and suddenly we've got a dog that is really troubled when left alone. And that can happen in puppyhood, that can happen in adolescence, that can happen in adulthood. I would say the one time where I am concerned when we start to see dogs in their later senior years, it is often confused with cognitive dysfunction because the two behaviors can present very, very similarly. But I don't think it's a higher prevalence of separation anxiety. I just think that we see a lot of different behaviors pop up as seniors.
That's really interesting. When you see a lot of these senior dogs, and I think many senior dogs do suffer from canine cognitive disorder that go undiagnosed because we culturally sort of think of age as pathology and just go, oh, the dog is aging. Like this is just
right.
part of aging. And so we overlook, and we discussed it with Dr. Marie Bartling in our Painish episode, where we're talking about things that we have normalized and we think, oh, he's just being a grumpy old dog, or she's forgetful senior dog, where really a dog who's thriving under specific conditions might not present as many of those issues. So what are some of those most common ways in which it presents? What do you see, and what are some of those calls that you're getting when those little red flags are going up for you?
Well, I'm really happy to say that the most common ways that it presents, it depends on who you are and where you're standing. And what I mean by that as a dog consultant, behavior consultant, people are reaching out to me based on the behaviors that are most likely, and I don't mean this in a rude sense, but most likely inconveniencing them or somehow affecting them in their lives. So the incessant barking that may be happening that's causing the landlord to leave a note on the door or the neighbors to complain, is more likely to trigger someone to reach out to a behavior consultant than the dog that might just be pacing and drooling because there's no problem as much, if you will, for the guardian. Similarly with urination and defecation in the house only when left alone, cleaning that up every day becomes a real issue. And then, of course, those dogs that are displaying signs of really disruptive and destructive behavior, ripping up carpeting, chewing on the transom or the door. Those are the three most commonly reported behaviors. And one of the gorgeous things about this now is that in the last 10 plus years, people have in-home cameras and they're starting to observe their dog. And we're getting inquiries about, my dog really is trembling and drooling when I'm gone. It's not causing me a problem, but apparently my dog isn't doing okay. And we're getting more and more of those calls, which I think is just fantastic.
What about the one where you come home and the toilet paper is unrolled throughout the entire house or apartment?
Been there, done that.
As adorable as that is, kind of, sort of.
Is my dog TPing me, or is my dog experiencing
That's
anxiety?
Right. Well, and
that's where your webcam comes back.
That's where you're 100%, Drew. That's what I was going to say, because is it partying or is it panicking? We don't know which one it is, right? And we won't
He's
know.
Like, yay, they're gone. Yay, I love it. Yes.
Exactly. I can get into
that
all
could actually
the
be
mischief.
it too. Maybe sometimes they're happy when we leave, and it's like, now I get to really play and have fun. That's not anxiety. That's a different thing, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, how many dogs do you know are, looking at that toilet paper roll,
Right.
but won't do it because mom and dad are here or
Right.
whatever, right? But as soon as they're
Right.
gone, hey, let's shred her up and get a party going.
Give everybody a sense of how long this should take, 'cause that's probably a tough one. There are expectations around this, I imagine, and then there's the reality,
Yeah.
case by case, I imagine. Yes.
It is, first of all, yes, thank you for saying that. Every single dog is unique, not only in their presentation of this behavior, but in the way and rapidness that they will respond to their treatment and protocol and training. But on top of that, every environment is unique, right? So you've got a dog in an apartment building versus a dog in a single family home. And then to add more complexity to that, we have the individual guardians that are putting a different layer on the case as well. So if people don't take anything else away from our discussion today, I want people to understand that the one dog in front of you is the only dog that you should be adjusting your training and treatment towards. There's a lot of population level studies that say...
We like hyperbole on this show. Go ahead.
All right. There's a lot of studies that will claim... I'm leaving the hyperbole out.
Right.
That'll say, certain percentage of dogs... Here's the bell curve, the low end, the high end, the mid section, insofar as how long it might take. And those population studies are very useful in many ways. But if I tell you that your dog is somewhere in this bell curve and you focus on here's where the most of the dogs lie, that doesn't really help me with information about your dog. Your dog is the one that's going to take 3 months, 6 months, whatever it may be, in order to get from starting point to resolution. And that may not be at all what your next door neighbor's dog did or the population study level indicated as an aggregate. So I think it's important, though, to remind people that this process is about training fear unlearning. And boy, if anyone out there has ever experienced a phobia or an extreme fear, and we've got many of them as human beings, right? Fear of flying on an airplane, fear of public speaking, fear of snakes and spiders, all those.
Let's not forget clowns.
Let's not forget clowns.
Let's not forget Drew.
Fear of Drew.
He scares the living you-know-what's out of me.
Oh, no.
Understood. But those kinds of fears and phobias, it is not as though you could say, I'm going to get over my fear of flying today or by the time I leave for my trip next week, right? This is a genuine process that we have to go through in order to help the individual gradually and systematically learn how to tolerate slight and then slightly larger pieces of whatever that fearful stimuli are.
How often do you get asked by new clients, should I just send the dog away for a month?
I used to get asked it a lot. I'm getting asked it quite a bit less now. And I think while I'm still asked it, I think that there's a lot more good information out there on separation anxiety than there was even 5 or 10 years ago. And so people are weighing some options, and some of that good information is about the fact that the environment is what's dictating this behavior. If I send my dog even to the most amazing person that will work on training at their house, the likelihood that it'll translate to being alone in my house is very slim. And unfortunately, board and train type of situations for many behaviors, separation anxiety included, are not the optimal, perfect environment for any dog, but certainly not for separation anxiety. And I love that idea, right? Let my dog go away for a month, give me a little time off, and then when he comes back, he's all shiny roses and perfection. But I don't see that happening really ever.
Well, you said the word process, and I think that's really important because you're hinting that there aren't quick fixes here and you can't just send the dog away to boarding school. And it also implies that if you could, that you were doing something wrong. And I think that's something kind of freeing to say is like, the dog isn't dysfunctional or damaged and you maybe aren't doing something wrong. You have this perfect storm of maybe genetic material, your schedule, life stage, environmental conditions, and they're all culminating in the dog not feeling safe. And so really you're talking about teaching proactively, how do we feel safe when we're alone and for how long and what kinds of strategies do we need for the dog to feel safe versus how do I stop my dog from howling when I'm gone, or how do I stop my dog from eating my sneakers when I'm not there, right?
Yeah. This is so important. And there's two things that you touched on there. One was something that I like to talk about a lot because, boy, the number of people I speak to every day, I see this as a recurring theme. So many guardians think that they have created this problem, caused this problem, done something in order to, facilitate this outcome of their dog chewing the door all day long. And what we really do know, I said we don't know a lot about what does cause it. We know a lot about what does not. What we really do know is that everything that one might say falls under the I'm spoiling my dog umbrella is not causational with separation anxiety. And I love being able to tell people that because how many of us have heard, well, if you stopped giving him all those treats and if you stopped, talking to him like he was your friend or like he was a child, or if you stopped letting him sleep on your bed or, all these things. And each of those have been studied ad nauseum since the early 1990s as not being causational. So that was really important what you said. And I wanted to make sure to point that out.
That's so important. We were talking to Kathy Murphy, who's a neuroscientist, and she was talking about sort of the difference, even within that category of the concept of safety, that there's actual safety, like there's a roof over me and boundaries and barriers, and then there's this idea of perceived safety. And that's the hardest thing for another living sentient creature. Like I can say, you are safe, but that's not going to tell my dog, like, yeah, you should feel safe, even though your secure base, your sense of security maybe is leaving. And so that perception of safety versus actual safety is a really tough thing to sell to a nonverbal creature.
It is, but remember, and Mark, you're about to jump in, and I just wanted to comment one last thing on what Drew said. It is a tough thing to
keep going.
He's patient. One of the things that's important about that, though, is have you ever tried to tell the person that's terrified of flying on an airplane and you're sitting next to them as they're about to take off and say, I just want to let you know, according to airline safety, blah, 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 rattling off the rules of the safety and how few people die in a plane crash versus dying or being injured in a car accident. And you can rationalize the poop out of that. And that person is still terrified. And you can tell them, I know that this is the best pilot and all the things, right? So we do this even as verbal communicators. Yeah. And so it's not as foreign as one might expect.
So that big question, which is safety oriented, I think. I lived through the January 1994 Northridge earthquake. And you live in California, which is why I'm asking the question. And my Golden at the time, he was never quite the same. And I got so attuned to it that I knew that at 5.3 aftershock, he was going to be at home trembling. So if I was at the office and I heard 5.3, I ran home. And there he was trembling. Like literally at 5.2, he wasn't. I'm not even kidding you.
No, I believe it.
Yeah. My question is, because you live in California and earthquakes and tremors are an issue, I'm just curious to know if after a quake or a major tremor, you get a lot more clients calling you saying, my dog's afraid to be at home alone now. Does that make any sense?
No, it does. And I will tell you what annually, and there's a reason I'm going to, for this annually, I get an influx of calls after the Blue Angels fly through around the Golden Gate Bridge and around all the high rises and stuff. Not so much after earthquakes. I'm not saying I've never had it, but I wouldn't say that there's a prevalence of like, wow, a bunch of dogs post earthquake. We recently had 6 months ago, had a bit of an earthquake here, and my dog, one of which who has suffered from separation anxiety, and another of which who is thunderstorm phobia. I mean, I was like, oh, earthquake, blah. And they were like, oh, yeah. I mean, they just had no concern. And so I think it's very dependent on the dog, whether they're going to, and what happened during that alone time. And there's also a difference between if you were alone when something traumatic happened, like the shaking of the building, versus if Dad were there, if you had been there with your golden, he might and just said, "Hey, bud, we're good." Who knows whether it would have affected him in the same way? So there's a lot of variables in that question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we were together because it happened at 4 a.m. The major quake.
The major quake.
So I guess the last question in this section, for me anyway, is there a prevalence in dogs that are adopted from shelters versus dogs that come perhaps from breeders, or we know their history more in some cases if they've been rehomed, or is it random?
Yeah. At this point, well, there's not enough peer-reviewed research to state one direction or another. At this point, I would say that it is relatively random. I mean, the caseloads that we see that are either adopted or are from great breeders is pretty similar. It's pretty similar.
That's interesting.
It is interesting. And I also think that one of the important things that we need to look at with that is if this is somehow heritable, is it just heritable within a lineage? Is it heritable across breed? So we just don't know. But I would say that it's quite prevalent to see both pieces of that coin, or both sides of that coin. I also want to say one thing, though. I think it's interesting that people will very commonly state that dogs that are adopted from shelter rescue are potential higher risk in having separation-related behavior problems. And while I disagree, one of the things we do not know is, are dogs being relinquished? Well, we know, yes, there are a lot of dogs being relinquished for this particular problem. Therefore, would that raise the number of dogs that were being adopted with this particular problem?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's an interesting twist.
One of those interesting
thank you for
statistical
saying
things
that.
again, right?
That's very insightful. Wow, thank you. That's interesting.
It's a big reason for relinquishment. And as such, we would know that, if you came in with it, the likelihood that you're going back out with it would be high. And I will say I'm doing a lot of work with shelters and rescues right now to help with best practices for working with dogs that are in that organizational environment, so that we can help find them the right environments. Yeah.
Okay, so I think this is a good time for us to take a break for a few minutes. We're going to hear a little bit more about our two sponsors. First, from our presenting sponsor, Colorado Citizens for Canine Welfare. And after that, Wonder Walker Harnesses. We thank them both for their support. It means so much to us, and we couldn't continue doing the show without the support of them. So thank you. And when we come back, I'm going to ask Malena a little bit about what it's going to take from you, the pet parent, to deal with this issue of separation anxiety, and what it's actually going to take from the dog, because it's going to require work from both of you, and she's going to break that down for us. So stick with us, and we'll be right back.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying our episode so far, and I want to thank the fine folks who've been helping bring it to you. Starting with Colorado Citizens for Canine Welfare. We love dogs, but what if loving our dogs is not enough? To truly love dogs is to hope for all dogs to live without fear and be treated with compassion and dignity. That's why we're teaming up with Colorado Citizens for Canine Welfare, or 3CW, to educate all dog lovers to stand up to puppy mills. Join our efforts to end the inhumane treatment of thousands of dogs who are trapped in commercial breeding facilities. Together, we can impact national animal welfare policies that shape the culture around pet keeping. Don't turn a blind eye to this suffering that is right in front of our eyes every day. To find licensed, inspected shelters and rescuers, go to the Find Dogs page on caninewelfare.org. Together, we can make a difference. And also, Wonder Walker. As I mentioned earlier, these harnesses were developed in 2003 and they're still handmade in Seattle by the same family. And what I know is that a lot of love, care, and passion go into these harnesses to make sure the quality is never sacrificed. They're available in extra small to extra large and an endless range of colors, and they make walks with your dogs easier and a lot safer for you and the dog. Visit wonderwalkerbodyhalter.com and use promo code LOVEDOG at checkout.
So I have a question around expectations, which I think I'd like to know. If I had a dog that I brought to you, you said before that, the dog guardian, the pet parent, shouldn't feel responsible. Like they haven't necessarily, maybe in some cases they really have done some things wrong, but in general, no, they haven't done anything wrong. And let's just move on from there and not get caught up in that kind of thing. So if I'm coming to you, my question is, what should I expect in terms of how much work you're going to want to do training me, the pet parent, and how much time are we going to spend on the dog? And I wouldn't be surprised if you said most of it's going to be with you, but let you answer the question, okay?
I think this is a really important question. And there's sort of a double or two-faceted answer, but I'll give you the first, which is the more important. When prospective clients or clients start to work with us, we spend a lot of time setting expectations not only for what they're going to be required to do, but what they should expect with respect to things like timelines and things like, I want my dog to be able to XYZ by next week, and we're going to remind them that not next week. We can't guarantee behavior change for sentient beings.
But we're having our wedding next week at our house, and our dog has to behave.
Yes, heard that one a lot of times, or some variation on this theme.
The 3-week honeymoon we're taking.
Exactly.
We're going to need that DeLorean to go back in time.
Exactly. But I think there's some good news for the sort of first facet of this question. Our goal is to take the guesswork out of the equation. So we work with our clients 5 days a week. Now, not all 5 days are online in a live video, Zoom or whatever. But we work in such a way that today I will, let's say, assess your dog. I'll gather all via video, live session, assess your dog, get all the information that I need in order for me to feel comfortable writing your training mission, as we call them, for tomorrow, literally just for tomorrow. And those training missions take about 20 20 to 30 minutes to complete. So that's one 30-minute session for tomorrow. And the clients are set up with expectations that they will write some notes as to what they observed when they were going through the Simon Says type of training that I have written for them. And those notes will help me and will allow me to create a training mission for the very next day. So much of what the client is really doing is this 20 to 30 minute session a day, 5 days a week. And all the guesswork is removed for them. The second facet, which is something that you were alluding to, is like, how much are you training the guardian or the pet parent? Over time and repetition, just like their dog is learning, they are also learning what this process looks like. Why did Malena make the decision to do this today instead of do that today? And if after a month or 2 or 3, they say, I think I'm ready to do this on my own, I'm happy to provide a session or a week or something saying, all right, don't forget, these are some of the guidelines that I want you to follow now that we're at a place where you can continue this training on your own. Some people train on their own starting in, at 2-3 months. Others are like, don't leave me until my dog can be alone for 4 to 6 hours without any concern. And that's fine too.
Are you seeing generally more cases? You've been at this for such a long time. Has it increased? Are you seeing more diagnosis? And if so, do you think that's more pets are getting diagnosed, or more that it's more prevalent now?
I was asked this question about a year after the pandemic was still going on, but about a year after pandemic started, and like, oh my gosh, we're going to see millions and millions of dogs. And what was really interesting was, while we did see a tremendous increase in inquiries and clients, I started to ask a lot of questions. I'm kind of that person that asks a lot of questions. And I found that there were several things that influenced the increase. One of them was that the media went bananas covering every dog is going to, be a disaster when this is over. I mean, I was interviewed for The Atlantic. I was interviewed for NBC, CBS, ABC. Just like everybody it was the talk of the town, at least in the dog arena. And so I think that there was a sudden awareness level that hadn't existed prior. I think also everyone, including my beloved mother, who is in her mid to late 80s now, learned how to use Zoom, which meant they knew how to use a camera, which meant they could look at their dog when left alone. And that opened up a whole lot of doors for people to say, oh, I didn't even know that my dog was howling all day because I live in a single family home out in the country, and I just watched him on video, and wow, this is surprising to me. So, I think that was an additional piece. And I think that lastly, as you probably know, during the pandemic, the percentage of American families and households that acquired a new dog during the pandemic was phenomenal. And when we're looking at something like separation anxiety, the research varies a little bit, but we're talking about, maybe 20% of the pet dog population suffering with some level of separation-related behavior problem. Well, if you take 20% and you multiply it by the number of increase in dogs, right? That's a lot of dogs. Yeah. Right now, it looks like if we took that 20%, that's about 38 million dogs in the U.S. alone suffer. And guess what? I can't take all those clients, so we need help with that.
Yeah.
So would I be overstepping my boundaries? I'm going to ask a tip-related question. just because I'm a believer in consistency.
Yeah.
And I learned with my first dog to say, watch the house every time I left. And I think it worked miracles for him, for my next dog, and now for my current dog. They get it, and they just kind of know he's coming back. Does that make any sense at all, or is it just me pretending?
It's totally just you pretending, I got to tell you.
No way. Are you kidding me?
Well, let me back it.
Fine.
Let me back it up.
I'm not going to stop saying it because I love it. And
No,
they love it,
I think
but
it's wonderful.
That's fair.
I think it's
Oh, yeah.
wonderful.
Uh-huh.
I do,
Yeah.
and I'll tell you why it's wonderful for a reason. Had your dogs had separation anxiety or problems with separation, it would not have helped. But I think
Okay, that's fair.
So, but they didn't already have that, and they hadn't developed that. And I think that dogs are masters of discrimination, right? And dogs rely on certain elements of the routine in order to go, oh, that's what's happening now. Oh, they're putting their shoes on. I know they're going to take me for a walk. Oh, they're putting those other shoes on. I know they're going to be gone for a couple of hours. And your statement is just another indication of this is what's happening next.
Okay. So I think what's going to happen next in this show is we are going to take a quick break, and then we are going to come right back. And where we're going to pick up is on what I think I sort of hear you saying, which is prevention. We're going to talk a little bit about prevention. Even though what I was doing wasn't preventing anything, we will be right back. I think now would be a good time to break away for a moment and just mention to our listeners that there are a number of ways, important ways, that they can support us. If you're listening and you're enjoying the show and you're finding it helpful, here's what you can do. 1, you can spread the word. Word of mouth is the best way to get the message out there. And tell anybody you know, a friend, a family member who has a dog that you think might also enjoy it and find it helpful, just to take a listen. That would be amazing. You can follow us on your favorite podcast app. You can follow us on Instagram and TikTok. Our handle is @LoveDogNews. That's @LoveDogNews. And the most fun is you can buy us a cup of coffee. You can go to Ko-fi, which is KO-F like Frank I.com/lovedog, and donate to the show, which is a great way to support us. And we set the minimum donation at $4, I believe, so it's not going to break the bank, as they say. All right, so we'll get back to the show now. Just wanted to remind you there are things you can do to help us along.
And we're back with Malena DeMartini. We're talking all about separation anxiety in dogs today. So let's get right into it today. I'm sure everybody's listening that either has a dog that suffers from this or is thinking about getting a dog or has a young puppy, is wondering, well, can you prevent separation anxiety in your dog? Can you do anything to keep this from happening in the first place?
So this is a question that I love to get. And it's also one that I get quite commonly. And I love to get it not because I have necessarily the perfect answer, but because I feel like it's an opportunity to dispel some myths.
Let's do it. I love
So let's do a little myth busting, shall we?
But it's definitely not watch the house, Hank. I'll be right back.
Well, let's just say, Mark, if you want to start your own...
I'm not letting you off the hook on that.
All right. So if Mark wants to start his own behavior modification separation anxiety protocol called Watch the House.
I'm going to call it Watch the House.
There you go.
Yeah, there you go.
So tell us, give us your prevention strategies if there is a way.
I love how earlier, Drew, you were saying, we don't want to pathologize these sort of issues. This is an issue that indeed exists in many, many, many dogs, or within their lives. But yay, number one, it is something that can be addressed and resolved successfully. So let's go back to prevention. And instead of calling it prevention, I would prefer to talk about setting our dogs up to optimize their success for alone time. Because optimize doesn't mean 100%, right? We want to set them up for success. And what's interesting about setting these dogs up for success is that the process by which we do so is not that dissimilar to an actual treatment protocol for a dog that is suffering. It is just modified and a little bit easier for us to execute. So if I have a new dog, whether that be a puppy, an adolescent, or an adult dog, I want to determine what increment of time I can leave that dog that will be safe. Remember, we only get one first impression. So let's make that first impression the best first impression we can possibly make. So that increment will probably be quite brief. Now, it's going to be individualized for the dog in front of us. But so often we say, I've got a new dog on Friday, and on Monday, I got to go back to my 8-hour-a-day work environment. And, sometimes the dog's fine, but sometimes they're not. And then we're backpedaling for weeks and weeks because we've exposed them to those unsafe absences. So that's a big first one. Choosing an increment that is safe. And then gradually and carefully introducing larger increments over time while observing the dog, making sure that those larger increments are continuing to be a safe experience for that dog. And before you know it, what may start out as a 1-minute absence becomes a 15, and before you know it, it's a 27, and then before you know it, it's a 53, and then you're gone for a couple of hours, and it's all good,
So let's say I missed the boat on all of those great prevention things, and now I'm staring at my dog going, I definitely think we've got some separation anxiety here. What should he do? What should be the first thing people do, or how do they start to get help or get help for their animal if they are suffering with this?
I'm going to give you the number one secret sauce for separation anxiety. All right. You heard it here, folks. Stop leaving your dog alone, period. And people hear that and they go, oh, right. Like I can't do that. But hear me out for a moment. The stimulus that is causing the dog to be terrified is alone time. And if we continue to allow them to rehearse that terrified, fearful, phobic response every time that alone time occurs, it will at best stay awful, at worst get even more ingrained. Dogs are professionals at what they rehearse. People too, for that matter. So we have to be careful with that. So we want to stop. If you had a pipe that was leaking really badly, the first thing is not to start wrapping tape around it. The first thing is to go turn off the water, right? And that's what we're talking about when we're working with these dogs, is to immediately stop that flow of water in their fearful response. But beyond that'll start to set the dog up for success. And the next thing I really think is to start to talk to a behavior specialist, get a consultation, and determine what best next steps are for you, for your environment, for your dog. There are a lot of really interesting behavior problems out there, some of which that you really could get your 5 top suggestions and be able to modify them. I don't know. What comes to mind to me is, my dog keeps jumping on me when I'm making dinner. Like, okay, do you really need to hire a behavior professional? Yeah, some of you might, because of the dog's persistence. But There are some methods that could be just implemented on one's own, and separation-related behavior problems are far too big of a behavioral emergency to leave it to chance and to Dr. Google advice. So that's a
So
big
they
one.
should get to a behaviorist for a formal diagnosis. Should they visit a vet to rule out pain or disease if this is a new kind of behavior? Should there be diet things that should be looked at, meds that are, what can I do,
Got it. Well, I think the veterinary team should be part of this process. Whether, first and foremost, because we do have to rule out pain-related or other types of medical conditions that might either mimic or look very similar to separation anxiety type behaviors. But the other thing to discuss with the vet from a very early stage is, this is what's happening with my dog. My dog is suffering when left alone. What kinds of pieces of the puzzle can we look at to support my dog's behavior modification protocol? And one of those could certainly be medication. Now, I'm not a vet and I cannot advise on medication, but I will say that we see quite a few dogs that are benefited from the use of pharmacology in these, particularly, certainly with separation anxiety, but with a lot of fear, anxiety, and stress behaviors. And this is something that can only be discussed with a vet or a veterinary behaviorist. And to make sure that it suits your dog and your dog's issue and your dog's needs and health. Diet kind of goes as a piece of that, and that's going to be very dependent on the vet or the vet behaviorist or the veterinary nutritionist. Some of the research indicates that as long as there's a species-appropriate, well-balanced diet, that it's not going to really modify the behavior much. And there's other research out there that says the opposite. And that is also a discussion for the vet or the veterinary nutritionist. I personally don't feel that I, nor do most behavior consultants and trainers, have enough education or the appropriate licensing to be advising on diet and nutrition. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting point, because we recently recorded a show which hasn't been released yet. Maybe by the time this one is released with you, it will have played. But he was talking about, he was a holistic integrative vet, and he was talking about heating foods, like heat producing foods like chicken and pork, versus cooling foods, beef, for example. And this is really going to depend on what you believe in, what your values are, and if you're willing to believe that when a vet tells you that. And I guess you'll try whatever course of treatment sounds right to you.
Well, and what you're getting at is sort of a holistic approach and a whole dog approach, where you're saying you're not just going to fix this by conditioning the alone. You want to look at the quality of the dog's life and make sure you're ruling out things like pain and disease, which might exacerbate the external behaviors that you're seeing. Your dog might have been suffering at a low level of outward behavior, and then suddenly, with the onset of, osteoarthritis, you might see a bigger increase in an older dog. And you're like, did you just develop separation anxiety at age 11?
Right.
Going back to your earlier point. So kind of my big takeaways from what you said of what can people do. One, suspending absences, which to some may sound like a far off dream, but you give some great examples in your book and in your work about, looking for helpers, looking for the community, looking for dog walkers, doggy daycares, neighbors. Oh my gosh, people might have to start talking to their neighbors and communities again.
Imagine that.
Ruling out pain, so getting a health screening, and then coming up with a really solid plan where you're very slowly, incrementally, not training the dog not to do behaviors, but rather teaching them, how do we feel better being alone? And so that's such a great kind of practical approach. So why don't you share with us kind of a quick case study about a dog that came to you where somebody said, okay, I need help. What do I do here?
I thought about this, and I it made me think of a dog named Aquila. And Aquila was not certain exact age, but about in the 2.5-ish age range when she was brought into their home. Mom and dad were incredible people, as are, by the way, all people that spend their time and work with a separation anxiety afflicted dog are the most amazing people. And I applaud you, because it is quite an adventure. But Aquila was a mix of she was a mix of a Klekai and something else that got into the litter the box that day. She was lovely. But one thing for any of you that are familiar with Klekais or some of the northern breeds, boy, do they have a good set of lungs on them.
Oh, man.
Yep. And when the guardians would leave, the level of the pitch of screaming that could be heard within moments after that door closing was just
thing.
off the charts. Yeah.
Mark, picture a toy husky in your mind, and you got a Klekai.
Yes, that's a perfect. A toy husky is pretty much what Aquila would have been described as. And so one of the reasons that they reached out to me, Mom had been working from home, and they had been, for the most part, managing her alone time just because they had no idea what to do. And then they got pregnant. With glee, they were very excited, but they realized, boy, this baby's going to grow up and need medical appointments and be going to birthday parties and going to want playtime in the at the neighbors, where that, we can't just leave the baby at the, they realized they were going to have commitments outside of the home. And I use this case in particular because I want people to understand, when we were talking about how the various nuances of not just the dog, but the environment and also the guardians. I mean, imagine the complexity that comes in when you're like, and now we have a baby in the mix, and we have to take the stroller with us and the diaper bag and all the things, right? I will say it was a joy. It was a true joy, as have been all of the work with all of my clients. But to watch the level of commitment that they had to spending that 20 to 30 minutes, 5 days a week working with Aquila. We started out her protocol with not even 1 second out the door. We started out her protocol with walk to the door, crack the door 1 inch, close the door, return. Those were the types of steps that we started with. And some people hear that and cannot fathom, well, how does that ever translate into I'm going to go 4 hours of alone time? But it does. It does. And one of the interesting things as we analyze the data, like Aquila's, is that we watch the trend line, and it's usually a considerably upward exponential trend line. So while we may be starting out with 1 second or less in the beginning, and it's going very, very, very slowly, by the time we get up to a few minutes, the exponential component starts to really take root, and we start to go from 2 minutes to then 10, and then from 10 to then 18, and that sort of thing. But the thing I wanted to mention, particularly about Aquila, was they had an imagined timeline because, well, in 9 months, there was going to be a big change in their home. And while I spend an inordinate amount of time talking to guardians about expectation setting and timelines and all of that, this was one where you can imagine they're like, I get it, but still going to be a baby in 9 months, whether Aquila is ready or not, kind of thing. And I learned a lot from them because it was a constant process of shaping to celebrate all of the little wins so that they would understand that even if they weren't at 4 hours by the time the baby was born, some of the things that we were doing were implementing some solid management strategies in order to be able to continue if we needed to. So we agreed that the urgency, right? Urgency of the protocol was sort of the enemy of progress because we were trying to go faster maybe than should. Ultimately, Akila did beautifully, was able to stay alone. She wasn't at 4 hours by the time the baby was born. She was at about 2.5, maybe it was 3. She was also very pregnant, so they were they were taking it a little slow. And then after the baby was born, they took a little break and continued their training. And Akila is now a very happy big sister to a beautiful little boy.
Oh, that's such a great story because it also highlights the importance of, what in the training world we think of as small approximations of those big goals, but really also that building momentum, you really get this inertia going. So even small wins need to be celebrated and they build quickly. But that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that story. Hey there, just one last quick little break before we wrap up our conversation today. I just want to remind you that this episode was brought to you by Colorado Citizens for Canine Welfare. Attention dog lovers, we've got a real problem. Every day, thousands of dogs are being bred in this country to produce for-profit puppies. These dogs are kept in deplorable conditions and routinely bred to turn out litters of puppies to be bought and sold in pet stores across the country. This has to end. Together, we can stand up to these cruel practices and say enough. We have teamed up with Colorado Citizens for Canine Welfare to educate, advocate, and stand up for dogs everywhere who desperately need our help. To learn how to find licensed and inspected shelters and rescues, go to the Find Dogs page at caninewelfare.org today. Also, Wonder Walker harnesses. This versatile dog harness is great for all dogs, especially those who really pull against your leash. You'll notice a difference on your walks right away, and it should give you peace of mind to know you're using the best equipment. Go to wonderwalkerbodyhalter.com and use promo code LOVEDOG at checkout. wonderwalkerbodyhalter.com. Now back to our show.
Okay, so here we are. We're back. It's the end of the show, and I want to give you the last word. What words of wisdom do you want to leave the show with and impart on our listeners?
I just want to let everybody know, first of all, think in terms of months, not weeks. But also think in terms of months, not years. This behavior is a very interesting one wherein, yes, it is a slow progression, but fear unlearning by nature, by the laws of learning, fear unlearning is a slow process. And we have to be kind and empathetic with ourselves as well as with our dog to understand that. And so people will commonly say, okay, months, not weeks, months, not years. And then the question will come up again. Well, but what do you think about the average dog? Or they'll ask basically the question again, right?
Just give me the number.
I want the dang number. I want it. And I commonly remind people that the training is going to take longer than you really wish it would. But it's not going to take as long as you're probably afraid that it might. Yeah. So it's a good place to end.
Well, that's great. I think that gives our people a lot of places to turn to. Where's the best place for people to reach out to you or learn more about the work that you're doing these days, Malena?
I think the best place is to go to my website, which is MalenaDeMartini.com. And there are a lot of free resources there, blogs to peruse, and ways to get in touch with us for free consultations and things like that. So feel free to reach out to us for help.
Well, we really appreciate it, and we'll put that all in our show notes. So if you are struggling with this, and if your animal's dealing or you think your dog might have separation-related problem behaviors, please go have that first conversation with your veterinarian. And if that's not an area they're comfortable with, seek a professional, a veterinary behaviorist, a certified applied animal behaviorist, or somebody who specializes in this area, because it is something you can get help with no matter where you live.
Hey, it's Mark here, just signing off for today. Thanks for listening to our show with Malena DeMartini. Separation anxiety is a huge topic. I hear about it every day, it seems. And there are things that seem like separation anxiety that are not separation anxiety, and there are things that are. So if you think your dog might be suffering from that, please go check it out. If you enjoyed the show, there are a number of things you can do to support us. You can tell a friend. Pass a link along, let the friend listen if you think it might be helpful to them. Word of mouth is always the best way. You can follow us on our social channels, Instagram and TikTok, @LoveDogNews is our handle. And you can always follow us on your favorite podcast app and leave a comment. Thank you for listening. We appreciate you so much. And until next time, may all your howls be happy ones. So long.
Let's not forget clowns.